Mode. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. Always appreciate the patience with the technical challenges. Okay, so this presentation is all about SB 79 implementation. All right, so we did a big thing in the housing movement last year. And now we have to and now cities have a role. And we as advocates have a role to make sure that cities do their job to implement this in the most equitable and productive way. So that's what today is all about. So we can build an affordable car light Los Angeles County for all. We're going to start with land acknowledgement. The Los Angeles Basin was home to the Gabrielino people whose stewardship shaped this place for generations. As advocates, we commit to carrying forward values of care, shared responsibility, and ensuring that everyone has a place to live here, now, and in the future. Just a little bit about Abundant Housing LA. Some of you may be new to this space. We are working to solve Los Angeles County's housing crisis. We are an all of the above organization, so we advocate for more homes at all levels of affordability. And our organizing model is based on activating, empowering community members on the ground through a series of chapters. And many of our chapter leaders are here today. We have over 20 chapters currently from the San Fernando Valley in the north, all the way to Long Beach in the south, and West Side for everyone on the west side, all the way to the Inland Empire, to Inland Abundant Housing LA, the Pomona Valley area. So that's a great way for you to all get involved. And we envision an LA that is sustainable, accessible, minimally car dependent, healthy, inclusive, and integrated for all. So my name is Scott. I'm the Director of Policy and Research for Abundant Housing LA. I've been in this role for about 3 years, almost 3 years now. I come from a combination of experiences, including over a decade and a half of experience in policy research, as well as local politics. I ran for city council in LA's 5th district, and I'm really passionate about abundant housing and safe streets and a more sustainable future for our urban regions in Los Angeles and across California. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what SB 79 is and what it does. So I'll be giving you kind of like an SB 79 101. Then we'll talk about implementation. So what role do local cities and by extension advocates play in terms of implementation of SB 79? We're going to talk about what we want to see as advocates for equitable and abundant housing when it comes to SB 79 implementation, and we'll talk about some next steps and how you can get involved. So what does SB 79 do? It's a pretty simple idea. SB 79 is designed to produce more housing near the state's highest capacity transit stops. So LA has the most ambitious expansion of transit in the entire country. Building, I think about seven new train stations opened last year. 3 more will be opening within the next 2 to 3 months. We're making extraordinary investments in transit, but unfortunately, we have not had the capacity, the rules, the zoning to allow housing, to allow people to actually access those communities that we're building that transit in. So SB 79 does 4 main things. It establishes a new geography of transit-oriented development zones surrounding the state's highest capacity transit stops. So the sort of half-mile radii around those places. It applies minimum zoning standards within those TOD zones in a tiered fashion. So basically, it raises the floor for what is allowed in terms of density in those areas. It gives transit agencies greater ability to develop on land that they own. We're not going to be talking a lot about that today, but that's another important feature of the bill. So Metro and BART have expanded powers when it comes to development on the land that they own, and other transit agencies around the state. And it provides significant flexibility to local jurisdictions. So cities and counties have quite a bit of power to shape how SB 79 looks and is implemented on the ground. So that's SB 79 in a nutshell. And what kind of transit stops are eligible for SB 79? So 5 sort of main categories. One are heavy rail stations. So this is like subways. So in the Los Angeles context, it's basically the B and D lines. Up north, you have the BART. Light rail stations. So these are other rail lines in Los Angeles, the A, the C, the E, the K. Commuter rail stations that have a certain level of service, so at least 48 trains per day arriving at that station. So this in LA County, the number of stations that meet that threshold is fairly modest. One example is the Glendale stop that serves the city of Glendale and Atwater Village across the train tracks, and then certain bus stops. So if it's bus rapid transit with all the bells and whistles, think the G line in the San Fernando Valley, dedicated lanes, all door boarding, all of that kind of stuff, then it would count. Those stations would count. And also bus stops that are served by dedicated lanes and have high frequency. So there's a few examples in LA County of this. Probably most particularly the Sepulveda bus lines in the San Fernando Valley and the Sherman Oaks, Van Nuys area. So, but the takeaway here is SB 79 does not apply to a random bus stop, right? That might have a bus coming every half an hour. These are really the highest capacity transit location stops in the entire state that we're talking about. Here in LA County, we don't have an exact count, but think of it as maybe ballpark 250 stops, something like that. And here's our best idea of what that will look like in LA County. SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, is tasked, along with the other MPOs statewide, with producing the maps for where SB 79 will apply. Those maps have not been released yet. This image is grabbed from a map that our friends at California YIMBY produced, and this is our best guess. It will look very much like this, although there may be some small differences on the margins. And this is our rail lines. It also includes rail lines and future bus lines that already have preferred alignments. So these are things like the Gateway line that will go to cities in Southeast Los Angeles, the extension of the E line to Whittier, the extension of the K line to Torrance. Our Metro board has already voted to approve those alignments, and the bill language there says that if those alignments have been approved or are being funded in the near term, then those station areas are also eligible for the SB 79 upzoning. As you'll see, we have some pretty good transit across the county. So there's a lot of coverage. Pretty much every region in LA County is covered to some degree by SB 79, with the exception of the Antelope Valley. The Metrolink stations up there do not have the service frequency to be eligible for SB 79 as written. And our estimate is that about 50 jurisdictions out of the 89 jurisdictions county-wide are eligible, have at least some SB 79 coverage. So the majority of jurisdictions will be impacted, or benefited rather, by SB 79 to some degree. Okay, so what projects are eligible? This is kind of a list of them, and this law, let me just give you a caveat that this law is very, very complicated. So I'm not, there's detail that I'm not sharing with you tonight, but I want to kind of give you the greatest hits. So what are the criteria for a project being eligible for 79? Well, they have to be in those transit-oriented development zones, so within a half a mile of an eligible transit stop. They have to be zoned for either residential, commercial, or a mix of those two uses. They need to meet certain minimum density requirements. The average unit size can't be too great. You know, these are protections to try to make sure the projects don't just serve wealthy people. There's very robust protections for renters. So no more than 2 rent-stabilized units that were occupied over the preceding 7 years can be demolished for an SB 79 project. So basically, you can demo a single-family home, you can demo a duplex, you can demo a commercial property that didn't have any renters, any housing on it, but larger multifamily existing housing cannot be demoed for SB 79. There are minimum affordability provisions. So it could be either 7% extremely low income, 10% very low income, or 13% low income. Most SB 79 projects will be using either state density bonus law or a local incentive program, so they would be meeting these thresholds by default. But it is any 79 project will include deed-restricted affordable housing, which of course we need a lot more of. And there are labor standards for projects over 85 feet. And that's a construction typology that generally needs unionized, high-skilled labor. And so that labor standard is a sort of increasingly a precedent at the state level for those taller projects. So those are the main criteria for whether a project can be eligible for SB 79. And these are the upzoning provisions. So these are the building standards for projects. So as you'll see, it's a tiered structure based on whether you're right next to a station, whether you're a quarter of a mile from a station, or whether you are half a mile from a station, and the level of capacity of the train stop. So heavy rail that has the most capacity has greater standards for upzoning than light rail or bus rapid transit. A lot of wonky zoning metrics here, but I think the big takeaway is depending on what kind of train stop and how far the project is away from the station, you're looking at between 5 and 9 story buildings with quite a bit of density. So this is a very powerful tool to deliver multifamily housing. Okay, so any questions so far before we roll into what role local cities play?
Yeah, Scott. So Samuel actually asked, and maybe we can attack this after this slide, but he asked, how do we discourage municipalities from developing alternative TOD plans as they don't have to, it would be a waste of their resources so to do. So all but
Yeah.
the most cash-strapped are sure to insist on it, but how do we let them know would be the wiser if they didn't?
Yeah, you're ahead of us, Sam. Yeah, we'll get there. So I'm going to talk about the different options that cities have, and then we'll talk about how we make sure to keep our cities accountable and what role we have to make sure that SB 79 is implemented as well as it can on the ground.
So, Scott, I have a question about the percentage for low income and very low. And
Yeah.
now in our city, we have a 20% inclusionary. Would this supersede that and allow fewer than 20%? Or would it still be possible to have 20% set aside as affordable?
No, that's an excellent question. It would not supersede local mandatory inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
So that is explicit in the law. This you can think of as a floor for what is required.
Okay. What about state density bonus laws? Do they apply here?
Yeah, so state density bonus law does apply. The law is very explicit that any project can use state density bonus law. And so what you can't use state density bonus law is you can't really break those height thresholds, right? So the height is dependent on the tier level and how far you are away from the transit stop. So you can't use state density bonus to get another 2-3 stories generally. But you can use state density bonus law to get more density, other concessions. So this stacks up in a really powerful way to really be able to produce some fantastic dense projects.
Okay.
Okay. So what can jurisdictions do? Here are a few of the main things that jurisdictions have power over when it comes to SB 79 implementation. They can defer certain sites until the next RENA cycle, so around 2030. And we'll go into more detail on this in just a minute, but certain types of sites can be exempted for temporarily from the zoning standards. They can, this is not going to, number 2 is not going to apply to that many places, but they can carve out areas where there is no walking path of less than 1 mile to the transit stop. So if the urban fabric is really not conducive to exactly what we're trying to produce, which is, people walking and biking to transit stops, then those areas can be carved out of the bill. They have to make a finding to do so. It's not likely to be the case for many places because, as you can recall, it's only a half-mile buffer around the transit stops, and this would be the threshold they have to meet is a 1 mile walking path. For cities with greater than 15 stops, so these are the state's largest cities. Think like San Francisco, San Jose, San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento. That might be all of them. They can carve out an industrial employment hub of at least 250 contiguous acres. So, if you have an area that is a job center that a city wants to protect for continued industrial use, they can do that, but they can only do one. So it's pretty limited. And then they can adopt a local alternative plan. So this is the biggest kind of hurdle for cities. It's quite a robust effort to create an alternative plan. But that we'll go into more detail on what those look like. But that would allow cities to have more flexibility over a longer time horizon than the deferral option. So let's start with deferral. So there's three different sort of what I categorize three different types of deferrals. The first is what we call sensitive sites. So there's three types of sensitive sites, all of which can completely be exempted from SB 79 until 2030, until the next RENA cycle. So those would be sites in very high fire severity zones, sites vulnerable to 1 foot of sea level rise, and locally designated historic resources. So these are still fairly limited. It's only very high fire severity zones. It's not high fire severity zones. It's not 3 feet of sea level rise. It's not state designated historic resources or nationally designated state resources. But these can be kind of zeroed out when it comes to default SB 79 capacity in the short run. In Los Angeles County, these will have some impact. The sea level rise, basically not at all. Venice and tiny bit of Long Beach is the only place vulnerable to 1 level of sea level rise. So, and there's no high capacity transit in Venice, so that's really a non-factor in LA County. There is a good deal of very high fire severity zone across the county, some of which overlaps with high capacity transit in places like Northeast LA and Hollywood. And of course, we do have across the county many historic resources, so that will be a factor. The second sort of major category of deferrals are sites in low resource areas. So, and cities can do this in a couple different ways. They can defer sites in low resource areas that are within jurisdictions that overall are meeting at least 50% of SB 79 density. So, if they're meeting a certain citywide threshold, they can defer low resource areas. They can also defer sites in primarily low resource areas where at the zone level, at the TOD zone level, the zone is meeting 40% of SB 79 density. And then the third category are of areas that can be deferred in the short term, or areas that have some existing reasonable amount of existing capacity in terms of zoning to produce multifamily housing. And these provisions in the law were adopted to assuage concerns about cities that had made good faith efforts through the housing element process to upzone near transit. So you see that here is one example of a city that did a pretty good job is San Francisco, which under Mayor Lurie passed the family zoning program, actually does upzone a good amount of the city, including some single family areas. And so I'm not that familiar with their zoning up there, but there's two provisions in the law that would allow cities to defer certain sites. They can defer sites in a zone where at least a third of the sites are at 50% of default SB 79 density, and the zone meets 3/4 of default SB 79 density, or they can also defer sites that individually reach 50% of the default SB 79 density. So those are kind of your deferral typologies.
So
Now,
Scott, do we have time to just answer a couple of questions?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, so just question submitters, just know that I'm bouncing around. I'm not skipping. I still see everybody. So First, Kevin asked, do we know specifically where in low resource areas within Los Angeles are eligible for deferral of SB 79?
Yeah, we do. So this is based on the state maps, the access to opportunity maps that are produced in collaboration between the Housing and Community Development Department and the Tax Allocation Committee, the CTCAC maps. So you can find those online, and you can look at a live map. They're updated every year, but we do have a good idea of where sites could potentially be deferred. We know what the low resource geography is. What is a little bit trickier is knowing whether those the parcels in particular low resource geography are eligible based on these provisions, because it's kind of a numbers exercise, right? To figure out whether first we need to understand whether a city has the overall citywide capacity, or a zone has what capacity the zone has. So there are some unknown questions. There's some analysis that would have to be done to say for sure that, which the cities are, at least some of the cities are doing, to say for sure whether certain sites can be deferred. But we do have a good understanding of where they might be deferred. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and I just to accompany that, I also responded to the question there with the link to the TCAC opportunity map. So if folks
Terrific.
want to check that out, so you can get a look at what we're saying. Okay, now next, James asks, here in Burbank and probably elsewhere as well, the city is fighting dedicated lanes for the NoHo and Pasadena BRT.
Yeah.
Should the city prevail, and it looks like it will this disqualify BRT stops here from SB 79? Or is it technically still qualified because some of the alignment will be dedicated lanes?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. And this is definitely going to be one of our calls to action, and something that we really want to get involved in. There's a lot of discussion and discourse around transit. We need high quality transit. We don't want it to be eroded. So we're going to have to fight for this. These decisions by jurisdictions certainly can potentially have an impact on SB 79 eligibility. Now, meeting the statewide definition of bus rapid transit is it's a pretty robust definition that has 5 or 6 things in it: all door boarding, dedicated lanes, defined station areas. I mean, the G line would probably fit all of those criteria, but I think that's maybe the only place in the county. Luckily, there is a looser definition in the law, but you need to do a few things. First of all, you have to have dedicated lanes. And then you also have to be you have to have 15-minute headways, and then you also have to be defined as a major transit stop in state law, which is the intersection of at least two different bus routes with combined 20-minute headways. So the gaming that some of these cities are thinking about doing certainly could impact eligibility at bus stops. And it would be, if it doesn't have all of those robust BRT features, you would have to have that frequency level of those dedicated lanes serving that particular stop. So this is a fight. And something that we really want to support you in and activate our communities around.
Yeah. And Matthew asks, in areas that were redlined and segregated minorities, how does this law prevent violation of fair housing laws and not perpetuate segregation and implement Government Code 8899.50, affirmatively furthering fair housing?
Yeah, great question. Great question. So the one of our calls to action is to make sure that cities center equity as much as possible in their implementation decisions, and I think this is an area of concern. I think the bill is certainly a powerful tool to affirmatively further fair housing if implemented properly. Right? It does open up quite a lot of high opportunity areas. Think about the E line. Think about the D line extension. Think about the East San Fernando Valley light rail corridor. There's a lot of excellent transit being built to serve high opportunity areas, and this could be maybe the most powerful tool we have to produce more housing near those transit stations. But there is gaming that cities can do, and there are implementation decisions that may be legal but may not further fair housing to the degree that we would like. And so it's going to be another one of our calls to action is to make sure that we are not deferring sites in high opportunity areas and single family neighborhoods. And that's something that we need your help with.
And then we'll just do one more question and then let you get back to this. Earlier, Shane Lee, you raised your hand. And if you still have a question, please feel free to voice it.
My question was the same one that the person from Burbank asked about the BRT. I was under the impression that LA Metro controlled that project. And from what I've heard, they're 90% done with the design. They're going to start building it in a couple months, like very soon. So I'm also curious about that. Weirdly enough, the mayor of my city, Ara Najarian, is the one spearheading the petition to try to completely remove dedicated lanes. It's just something I'm very worried about as well.
I think it's safe to say that the actions of cities and the voices of cities and city votes matter when it comes to the implementation of these projects. And projects can be watered down and are watered down because of opposition from city councils and sometimes because NIMBY city council members sit on the Metro board. So the decision makers in both realms definitely matter. I think about the Van Nuys light rail corridor. There was originally going to be a section of that light rail corridor that extended up San Fernando Road to the city of San Fernando. The city of San Fernando didn't want that. I think that was a factor in why that phase 2 is not moving forward. So there is risk here. Metro has a certain degree of power, but cities also have some power when it comes to their rights of way. And Metro is susceptible to the politics of local city councils.
Yeah. Okay, I think that I just want to let everyone know I do see there are questions in the chat. We will get back to those, but I just want to let Scott get further in the presentation here.
Yeah, and I'm happy to go a little bit. We can go over past 7:32 if folks have lots of questions. Okay, so local alternative plans. So this is different from deferrals because local alternative plans do not have a horizon, right? They don't have to end in 2030, and they allow cities to shift around density. That being said, there are many parameters that control the extent to which cities can do that at the citywide level, at the transit-oriented development zone level, and at the site level. So at the city level, a city that adopts a local alternative plan must demonstrate that the overall zone capacity citywide is exactly the same as would be allowed under the default SB 79 provisions. So they can raise some here and lower some here, but the zone capacity has to be equal. At the TOD zone level, so at the individual station level, zone capacity must be at least 50% of the default SB 79 standards. And at the site level, the only sites that can be completely zeroed out are those sensitive categories we talked about earlier when it came to deferral. So sea level rise, very high fire severity, historic resources. But the historic resources cannot exceed 10% of the overall area of the TOD zone. So there is a parameter there that controls what cities are allowed to do. Tier 2 sites can be no lower than 30 units per acre and a residential floor area ratio of 1. All other Tier 1 sites, you cannot reduce density by more than 50%. And there's also a parameter about increases in zone capacity. So you can't, if you're shifting density from some parcels to other parcels, those parcels that are receiving the density, that density cannot be increased greater than 200% of the maximum SB 79 density. So this is to protect from gaming where you just park a ton of density on certain sites when you're never going to get to a 20-story tower or the like. So the cities have substantial power if they want to go down this road, but there are also quite a lot of parameters that hem them in and ensure that they are still producing a good amount of zone capacity. In fact, the same amount of zone capacity citywide.
Bobby, do you have a question?
Yeah, real quick, I just want to clarify. Scott, you said that cities can't zone more than 200% of that maximum SB 79 density. Is it true that they can't, or only 200% counts against these numbers?
No, so this is like so if you think about like the local alt plans are like you're shifting the density, right? So you have some sites that are sort of exporting their density and some sites that are importing density, right? To make sure that the overall density is equal. So the sites that are receiving more density, where they have a cap of 200% of the maximum SB 79 density. Let's say on that particular site, you're allowed to build a 7-story project with a certain number of units. You could move density over there to create like a 14-story tower, mid-rise, but you can't do like a 30-story tower. Like that would break the 200% rule. And that's protecting from cities gaming the system. Does that answer your question, Bobby?
It does, but then it was different than my understanding. So just to be clear then, SB 79 also limits the density in these areas.
No,
it doesn't just prevent it from counting against it.
No. The SB 79 does not limit any jurisdictions um, any jurisdiction could do whatever they want when it comes to zoning their city however they want, right? But what it does limit is if they're passing a local alternative plan and saying, I don't want density on these single family parcels. I'm going to put it on these major corridors. It prevents them from creating a situation that cannot reasonably be assumed to be able to produce the same level of density citywide, right? Like there's very few places where a 30-story tower could be feasible. We don't see much of that in LA. It's very expensive to build those. You need union labor. You wouldn't be able to get the rents that you needed in most locations in LA County for that. So it's just within the context of the local alternative plans that there is this cap. Doesn't mean they can't increase density however they want outside of a local alternative plan.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so that is local alternative plans. And okay, so these are like basic approaches that cities can take when it comes to implementation. So number one is let it go, let it ride. Let the bill do what it was written to do. And the bill goes into effect in the middle of this year, in July. And if cities do nothing, then those provisions will be the law of the land for those transit-oriented development zones. And it's a lot less work and a lot less staff time to just do nothing, or pass an implementation ordinance to just adopt the standards that were passed via state law. So that is an option that I think some cities will take. The other three are, more aggressive when it comes to meeting local desires. And these other three options, they're not mutually exclusive, right? So cities can do all of these things if they want, or some of them. So number two is deferral, sometimes called delayed effectuation of eligible sites. They can do that. That has to be done at the site level, right? There's all these different types of sites, and this analysis to demonstrate that cities can defer those sites. They can't just say, I don't want anything in this transit-oriented development zone to be SB 79 eligible, because they actually have to identify every individual site. So that's an exercise in and of itself. Some cities can actually adopt upzoning ordinances outside of SB 79 to meet deferral thresholds. Right? So this is actually what the city of LA is planning to do. They are planning to, it looks like they will be upzoning some subset of single family neighborhoods that will be eligible for SB 79 to certain higher density. And if that upzoning ordinance reaches a 50% threshold, then in the near term, before the 7th housing cycle, before 2030, then those sites would not be eligible for the 100% SB 79 default thresholds. So some cities are looking to do things like that, which is legal. We can argue about whether it's desirable or not, but it's legal. Or the final option is to adopt a local alternative plan. That is the most challenging option for a city because it's a huge math problem, right? Particularly for a large city like Los Angeles. They need to do very robust analysis to show that They are meeting the same zone capacity citywide, et cetera, et cetera. So at least in the city of LA, they will not be doing this very soon. It's too big of a project. They're focused on numbers 2 and 3. Other cities may do this. So Beverly Hills looks like they're going to do a local alternative plan. They only have there's only three station areas that take in some of Beverly Hills geography. So and they're a wealthy city with a reasonable amount of staff capacity. So in their case, a local alternative plan is feasible in the short term. So this is really going to depend on local conditions and advocacy. Okay, this is maybe the most important slide in the presentation. So these are our priorities, and we've talked about some of these things already due to your very astute questions. These are our priorities for what SB 79 implementation should look like on the ground. Number one, cities have to follow the law, right? So cities can flout SB 70. I mean, they can't legally, but cities are famous for flouting all sorts of state housing laws, right? So, they could refuse to process SB 79 implementation, SB 79 projects. They can do all sorts of things. They can defer sites that are not really eligible to be deferred. All sorts of things. So, that's the simplest thing. We want to keep them accountable to actually follow the law. Number two is really important. We want cities to not defer or exempt parcels in high opportunity and single family areas. Number three, we talked about this. We need to protect these high capacity transit projects, both because we desperately need this transit for our city, get people out of their cars, reduce carbon emissions, and because the quality of the transit and how it's built on the ground can determine whether projects are eligible for 79 or not. So I'm really excited about doing that work and working with you on the ground and also our partners in the mobility space to protect important projects like the North Hollywood to Pasadena bus rapid transit project. 4, we need to center housing equity in implementation decisions. So this is going to play out in all sorts of ways. But one example that I think about is we do not want cities to defer and exempt single family parcels and not duplexes, right? That is not equitable. That places more displacement pressure on the renter occupied duplexes than the single family homes that are eligible for SB 79. That does not affirmatively further fair housing. Lots of other ways, but that's just one example. And then finally, we want cities to be intentional when it comes to sensitive and low resource areas. So I think cities are going to be tempted to take kind of a really blunt approach. Like, let's do all of the deferrals that we possibly can. That's not going to lead to high quality implementation. When it comes to our low resource areas, for example, it might be appropriate to defer duplexes in South LA. Do we want to defer projects on commercial parcels that have no housing? We already know that South LA is gentrifying. If we can't produce any housing in South LA, that is going to increase displacement pressure on the existing housing stock. Similarly, on the fire severity area, not all very high fire severity areas look exactly the same. Some are hillside and not very easy to access by our fire trucks. Some are, on wide, flat roads that are easy to access, and some of those communities are improved with 100-year-old houses that will go up like smoke as soon as a fire comes in. And so I think we need to be really thoughtful. Maybe it makes sense to redevelop those properties if they can be properly accessed by our fire infrastructure, because new buildings are much, much, much safer when it comes to fire. So we want cities to be thoughtful and nuanced, to make decisions that will produce the housing that we need, that will protect the people that live in those communities, and that will affirmatively further fair housing. So a few next steps. We believe SB 79 implementation is likely to be heard by LA City's Planning and Land Use Management Committee on January 27th. So this is going to be a big call to action. We'll definitely need your help in terms of writing emails, coming to give public comment, and all of the rest. We've already talked about NoHo to Pasadena. I'm really eager to talk to our friends to our activists on the ground who are in these communities and hearing the buzz, because we want to be there with you fighting the good fight on that. It's a really, as I mentioned earlier, approximately 50 cities across the county will be eligible to some degree for SB 79 projects. We're building out a system to track SB 79 votes across that really large group of cities. If you want to be involved in that, let me know. Jake Pierce and I are working to build out that system. I know some of our volunteers are already engaged in that work. And, nothing beats just, good old-fashioned humans telling humans what's going on. So you're our eyes and ears on the ground. So let us know what's happening in your city, and so we know to get involved and marshal our organizing resources. We have reached the questions and discussion section of our event tonight. It's a couple questions to kind of prime the audience. Let us know if you have any questions and what buzz you're hearing. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, there's a lot in the chat going on too that we haven't got to. So
okay, let me stop sharing, and now I can see your faces, which makes me happy. Okay, that was a lot of information. Yeah, let's take it away. You can either drop it in the chat or raise your hand physically, or use the raised hand feature on Zoom. Get our attention, and we'll answer your questions.
I'll get us started. I will say something that I thought was interesting was that Thomas asked earlier. I think we were talking about, it was the question of like eligibility, and they asked could that fight be cut off like in some sort of cleanup legislation, like if it was already eligible for SB 79, no turning back the clock, because they worry that it could be used in like a tactic, like as a Trojan horse to sabotage SB 79.
Yeah. I think those discussions are happening. We are sponsoring one cleanup bill. The co-sponsor gang from SB 79 is back together to co-sponsor SB 677, which is cleaning up SB 79, also authored by Scott Wiener. It's pretty narrow in scope, but there may be another bill, and that may be something that comes into it. That there's definitely a concern, a lot of concern around this.
Yeah. Let's see. When do we know when a local alternative plan has to be filed by?
Yeah.
Let's see. And if it took an extra 2 years, for example, would SB 79 projects filed when the bill goes in effect in July be built?
Yeah. So there's no deadline on local alternative plans. Cities can do them whenever they want to. And the bill will go into effect in July, whether there's a local alternative plan or not. So, in the absence of any local implementation ordinance, whether it's opting for deferrals or a local alt plan, the bill just goes into effect as written. So it's a
And
pretty tight deadline for cities to pass an implementation ordinance if they want to adopt those local control features, because HCD has to review their implementation ordinance. So you actually see some cities working at lightning speed. It's an interesting natural experiment. Cities are always telling us it takes so long to do these things. Oh, you want to upzone single family neighborhoods? We need like 30 more years to study how to do that. All of a sudden, they just have a ton of capacity to do things really quickly.
yeah. And then the last one I'll do, and then if anyone else has a question that the rest of the presentation didn't answer, then I would then invite you to speak up or put it in the chat again after this. So Joyce just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that quote unquote sensitive sites can be exempted permanently so long as density is made up elsewhere.
Correct.
Okay. Alrighty.
The one exception I would note of that is that there's a limit to how much you can do relative to historic resources. So if you have a TOD zone that has that is surrounded by a historic preservation overlay zone, only 10%, you can only exempt 10% of the area of the overall TOD zone area with historic resources that you're exempting. So there is a limit to how much you can do when it comes to historic areas, even through a local alternative plan. But basically, the answer is yes. Great question, Joyce.
And since no one is speaking up, Travis just asked that he's heard that there's a required review period for local alternative plans, so the city basically needs to submit by March to hit the July deadline. Is that about right? 3 months for HCD to review.
That is about right. Yeah, I mean, it's not just for alternative plans. It's for any implementation ordinance. Any local implementation ordinance needs that review period. So you see City of LA trying to get this all wrapped up, trying to get City Council to pass a plan in February so that they have enough time to get that plan approved prior to July 1st.
I have a question. In areas, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So in areas, I'm thinking of Highland Park, South Pasadena,
Yeah.
which are very low dense with maximum 3-story buildings. Would it be possible to build 5- and 6-story projects within that radius? That would certainly change the character of those towns.
Yeah, so a couple things. One provision that I did not mention is there's this small city carve out. So South Pasadena is among those places where the zoning standards will only go out to a quarter of a mile rather than a half a mile. This was a political compromise thing to get the votes. So that is one constraint. in certain locations. Beverly Hills is another one of those places. Um, uh, and the other thing I would say is that so those areas are served by the Metro A line, which is light rail, not heavy rail. So those are tier 2 stops, not tier 1. So the scale of the projects will be somewhat smaller than the scale around a D line station in the Miracle Mile. But they will be, they could be within a quarter of a mile. A tier 2 station could be, I think, at like 5 stories. So it will be it could produce buildings that are of a different scale than what you're seeing now.
Would that be 5 stories but not for South Pasadena or Highland Park, these small towns? Or
Well, so let's go back to our zoning standards slide. So we're talking tier 2, within a quarter of a mile could be 6 stories.
Mhm.
And within a half a mile, 5 stories. So that would include places like South Pasadena and Highland Park.
Okay. And Pasadena would also be able to have these taller buildings next to transit stops. We have a number. Yeah, we have like 6 or 7.
Yeah. Actually, Pasadena is definitely going to be a major focus of ours. After the city of LA, by far, the cities that have by far the most stations are Pasadena and Long Beach.
Yeah, our mayor is ballistic on this. Mayor Gordo, he's
He's been pretty interesting on this on this issue, including writing a letter recently about our cleanup bill that I was just telling you about. Basically, I mean, illegally promoting a position that the Pasadena Council did not vote on. He seems to think he can go rogue.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so San Bernardino is not subject to SB 79. San Bernardino County is not subject. I mean, the cleanup legislation is clarifying this, but one thing that I did not mention.
Scott, I wasn't asking about San Bernardino County. I was asking about the San Bernardino line in LA County, the heavy rail, Metro Rail, not Metro Link, but Metro Rail, the heavy duty Metro Rail commuter trains.
Yeah, that would be MetroLink, the MetroLink station, and none of those stations meet the threshold. Our best guess is the only MetroLink, the only commuter rail stations that meet the threshold in LA County are Glendale and Burbank. Otherwise, there's just not enough trains per day to meet the threshold, unfortunately. So like Cal State LA, those stations will not meet the threshold.
Right. In Claremont, however, we have the light rail also. So that hits us. So that puts us in tier 2 instead of 1, I assume.
That's correct. The Claremont station will be a tier 2 SB 79 eligible station for sure.
And also Pomona North.
And Pomona North. Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I have a couple questions. One is, can you mention briefly the cleanup bill, what it'll be focused on? And two, do you have any sense of the supervisors, the LA County supervisors, where they're at in
Yeah.
responding to SB 79?
Yeah, good questions. So the cleanup bill is pretty narrow in focus right now. It was going to do more things, but committee negotiations, it got pared down, and then there may be a second cleanup bill that's introduced later by Wiener. But the main thing that the current cleanup bill does is clarify the definitions of which counties are eligible, on which transit and which transit stops are eligible for SB 79. The intent of the law was for San Bernardino County not to be eligible because it's not it didn't there's a the law defines urban transit counties as counties with at least 15 urban train stations, and San Bernardino County doesn't quite have that. It has about 13. But some people thought maybe it was eligible because there are some long distance Amtrak stations in San Bernardino County. And the definition of passenger rail and the law made that confusing. So, long story short, this bill is mostly focused on clarifying exactly which train stations across the state will apply to 70. Will be eligible for SB 79. In terms of the Board of Supervisors, one contextual note I will mention, this is another one of those details. I said in the beginning of the presentation I wasn't going to share every single detail of SB 79, but I'll share an additional one right now, which is that station areas in unincorporated areas are not SB 79 eligible until 2030. So East LA, unincorporated East LA, for example, is not yet SB 79 eligible. It will be, but not as of yet. And that is not an exemption that any jurisdiction has to opt into. It's automatic. Again, these laws are very complicated when it comes to stacking up those votes, and this was something that there was a concern that some of the counties are very large with small boards of supervisors, and many residents of unincorporated areas don't feel well represented. And there was a concern that those types of areas needed more time to be able to adopt local implementation ordinances and local alternative plans that met their specific local needs. So that's kind of the origin of that specific provision. As per the different supervisors' opinions on SB 79, I think it varies to some degree. They haven't had, because of this provision, they don't have to do much with 79 yet. So I think we'll kind of see. But there certainly are ideological differences in the Board of Supervisors, and I think I would anticipate that you'll see a variety of different opinions in the future.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Happy to take more questions, but I do want to mention, this is 79 implementation is going to be a very big part of what we do over the next 6 months and beyond. The best ways to keep informed, if you're not already informed, are to sign up for our newsletter and to engage with your local chapter. I know many of you are already doing those things, but I have to kind of share those calls to action. That's how you're going to find out about city council votes, metro votes, and all of that stuff. Of course, We'll put stuff on our social media too. But if you're not already engaging those ways, please do so. Other questions? I think I just saw one coming in, maybe. Do we have anything else, Joshua?
I don't think so. I think what just came in there was me pasting the link to our newsletter.
Okay, awesome. Well, the battle continues. This was a huge win for our movement, and many of you were intimately involved with this. So thank you so much. There's still work to do. So keep engaged. Thank you for your wonderful questions and all of your advocacy, and we'll see you guys soon.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.